Using contractions in everyday conversations will help you sound more natural and more authentic when you speak. In this lesson, we're going to talk all about the power of contractions, what they are, how to form them, and why they're so important for your verbal communication skills. Later on in the lesson, we're going to work through some practice exercises to help you feel confident and easily use contractions in every conversation. Contractions make your speech more natural and more fluent, and they help us to convey information more efficiently. So if you're ready, let's dive right into this lesson on contractions. What are contractions? Contractions are shortened forms of two words that we put together to make one new, shorter, more efficient word. So basically, to form a contraction, we cut some letters, we delete letters of the two words, put them together, add an apostrophe to replace those deleted letters, and we get our contraction. It makes more sense when you look at examples, so let's do that. Do not becomes don't. She is becomes she's. So the two words become one. He would becomes he'd. This one, we lose a lot of letters. We delete everything after the word he. We throw in an apostrophe to make up for it, and he would becomes one word, he'd. But why go to all this trouble? Why should we use contractions when we speak? There are lots of reasons, but probably the most important is this: it sounds more natural. American speakers use contractions all the time because they are a better fit for the rhythm of American English. Using contractions will allow your speech to flow more fluently and naturally. So when we use contractions, we sound more like people actually sound in real conversations. Listen to these examples, and I want you to notice how much more natural it sounds when I use the contraction. I cannot do that versus I can't do that. Just flows more easily. She is not listening. She's not listening. Sounds more like the way I'd really say it in a real conversation. He would like that. He'd like that. Do you hear the difference? Contractions are just a better fit for the rhythm of English. Second good reason to use contractions is that it conveys your tone and your attitude when you speak. Using contractions will give you a more informal tone to your speech. It'll also help you sound more friendly and conversational when you're having a conversation. So using or not using contractions, you have a choice. We'll talk about that in a moment, but using or not using contractions will help you convey your meaning. It will set the tone, it'll convey your attitude and set your intentions during a conversation. Let me show you what I mean. If you're trying to let your listener know that you are angry or irritated or annoyed, you may want to avoid using the contraction and use the full words instead. You can also choose to use the full words instead of the contraction to emphasize a point that you're trying to make. So if you're really trying to drive home a point to your listener, you really want to make sure they understand, you may choose to use the full words instead of the contraction. Okay, so to summarize that, if you're angry, irritated, annoyed, or if you're trying to make a point, or if you really want to emphasize an idea, then do not use a contraction. You see what I did there? I could have said, don't use a contraction, but I said, do not use a contraction. Don't use a contraction. Do not use a contraction. So I emphasize the words as well. I kind of put spaces between the words as well to emphasize my point, but you can see what I'm doing. It definitely it's more impactful and there's a stronger intention when I don't use or do not use contractions. Let's go back to our examples. And I want you to again notice how not using a contraction and using the full word changes your tone, your attitude, your intention, and your meaning. I cannot do that. I can't do that. First one is definitely stronger. Whatever emotion I'm feeling, you can probably sense that there's more to it than just a very neutral kind of feeling or meaning behind that phrase. Listen to the next one, same thing. She is not listening. She's not listening. Again, using full words sounds more forceful. He would like that. He'd like that. He would like that. He'd like that. That one doesn't sound so angry, but it definitely sounds stronger for whatever, or that there's a reason that I'm doing it because I'm using the full words. People are not as used to hearing it. So when we choose to use the full words, it's definitely a different emotion, intention, meaning. It changes the tone of what you're saying. Now, sounding forceful is fine if that's the emotion that you're going for. But if not, you can give your listener the wrong idea because they might think that you're angry or impatient or annoyed when you're really not. This can cause hurt feelings. It can cause arguments or worse. So unless you're really trying to express a stronger emotion, use the contraction. As I tell all my students in our private sessions, there's not a right or wrong answer for when to use or not use contractions, but I want it to be a choice. I don't want it to be something that's out of your control because of the way that you pronounce certain words or certain phrases. I want you to have control over this so that you can speak in a way that accurately reflects your tone, your mood, your intention, and your meaning. The third good reason to use contractions is that listeners expect them. You expect to hear them when you hear English. And when we don't give the listener what they expect, when our speech does not match what the listener is expecting, that's when communication breaks down and we are not easily understood. So we want to avoid that and give our listeners what they're expecting. Fourth good reason to use contractions, it saves time and effort. And who doesn't want to save time and effort? When we use contractions, we can communicate the same message in fewer words. So we convey information much more efficiently. Now, one important thing to keep in mind, when I talk about using contractions, I'm talking about speaking, not writing. American speakers will use full words when they write or type, whatever you want to call it. So anything written, you probably will want to stick with the full words. It's more formal and a little more professional, especially if you're in the business world. But when we speak, even in a formal setting, we almost always use contractions. So when you're writing, especially formal writing, you'll probably use the full words. But when you're speaking, contractions are a much better fit. Okay, it's practice time. Let's practice some contractions in short but common phrases. Our first contraction is don't. Do not becomes don't. So really push your lips forward to hit that O, don't. You don't want it to sound like dun, dun. Push your lips forward, don't. O, so tight, small circle on the O. What happens with the T will depend on what comes after the word don't. So that can change. But in our practice phrase here, the T is followed by a consonant. And in the American accent, at least, when the T is followed by a consonant, when T is at the end of the word, and the next word begins with a consonant, we're going to use what is called a stopped T. So we leave space for the T by closing off our vocal cords, but we don't make a sound for the T. So we don't say don't, we don't pop out the T, we stop it before it pops out. And you just do that by, think of your throat, just your voice stopping. Stop your breath, stop your voice, don't. That's it. Okay, so we've got our O, we've got our stop T. Don't worry about it. The other thing I want you to notice in this phrase, there's a Y shadow, what I call a Y shadow. It's the connection of the vowel E at the end of worry and the vowel at the beginning of about. There's a Y sound in there, and that's how we get a smooth connection between those two words. Worry, worry about it. Worry about it. worry about it. So get that Y shadow. Next thing I want you to notice, the T. So we talked about T does different things. When T, in the American accent, when T is between two vowels, it turns into a very light D. And that's what you're going to hear on the T at the end of the word about, going into the vowel of the word that comes out, the word it that comes after it. So I'm not going to say about it. I'm not going to pop that T. I'm not going to stop the T. About it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to turn that into a D so that I can really link it together. About it. About it. And the placement for this is, if you can roll your R, it's one hit of the R. That doesn't help you. It's the very tip of the tongue right above where your top teeth and top gums meet. It's not on the teeth, it's above. And it's just the tip of the tongue. About it. About it. About it. I have other lessons that practice that. If you want more practice, you can take a look at some of my other videos about T. But let's put all that together. Get that big O. Stop your T at the end of the word don't. Use the Y shadow between worry about it, and the T turns into a D between about and it. Got it? We're going to do it a couple times slowly, and then we will speed it up to a conversational pace. So let's do it slowly, but connect everything. No space between the words here. That's the hard part about pronouncing English. One of the hard parts of pronouncing English is getting the connection between the words. So slow it down. Here we go. Don't worry about it. Good. I'll do it and then you can repeat if I didn't say that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Good. Now, the way I would say it in a real conversation, let's speed it up. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Good. And when you practice your speech, you should always play around with intonation. You can tell I did 3 different intonations there. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's different meanings, different intentions. So you can play it. But the more you play around with that pitch, up and down in pitch, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The better you'll sound and the more expressive you will be. Okay, good. Let's practice our next phrase or our next contraction, which is I'm. I am becomes I'm. So the basic rhythm, one thing I want you to notice about this word, it can be pronounced as I'm with a big I, but most of the time I'm is going to be reduced. It's a reduced word. We reduce pronouns in English. I'll talk about that a bit more in just a second. But basically we say instead of I'm. Okay. Quick explanation. I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent, I hope, but the basic rhythm of English is knowing where to rush through words and knowing where to linger on words. And really it's the vowels, when to rush through vowels and when to linger on vowels. And there's a lot you can learn about that. I have other lessons about rhythm, but one rule I can give you is that we rush through pronouns. Well, most of the time. If we choose to emphasize a pronoun for a reason, we could, but there would be a reason for that. I'm going to the store, not you. I'm going to the store. Does that make sense? I'm emphasizing it for a reason, but most of the time that doesn't happen. And we will say, instead of I'm. And that's what we're going to practice in this phrase. I'm hungry. So say, that's the syllable that you're going to rush through. You're going to really linger on the first syllable of hungry. So we're going to feel that contrast between rushing through a syllable by cutting the vowel and lingering or emphasizing a syllable by making the vowel longer. I'm hungry. You try it. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Perfect. So I'm is a really common pronoun. When I pronounce it by itself, I will say I'm, not but most of the time in real conversations, in real phrases, and in real sentences, we end up saying instead of I'm. So here's an exercise that I give to my students. I tell them to do this when they are making their coffee in the morning, when they're taking a shower, when they're, well, I can't do it when you brush your teeth, but it takes 10 seconds. So you can do it anytime throughout the day. Take the word I'm, you're going to pronounce it rush through that word. Just pick a word to put after it. Any word will do. You can say anything, but stress the first syllable of the word that comes after the right? So this is what it would look like. I'm hungry. I'm leaving. I'm tired. I'm here. I'm sick. I'm happy. I'm sad. So you're practicing that rhythm. You're also practicing this really common pronoun. And the more you practice this pattern of rhythm, the more automatic it will become in your daily conversations. And just do it anytime you remember throughout the day. Then if you want to get really advanced, you could put the word not after the And you, again, rhythm pattern is going to be rush through the So reduce I'm to because we rush through it. Really linger on the word not. I'm not happy. I'm not sick. I'm not ready. I'm not leaving. I'm not hungry. Whatever it is, you can come up with better words than I just did. But you can see how practicing those rhythmic patterns will help change the rhythmic patterns in your conversational speech. So try that exercise even once a day for 10 seconds. If you do it every day, you will hear the change. You'll start to hear it pop into your conversations when you least expect it. Okay, next pronoun. She is becomes she's. She's is a pronoun. So when again, rhythm pattern, when I say it by itself, I am going to say she's with a long E, but most of the time I'm rushing through that word and she's turns into shuz. Shuz. This one's a little bit hard to isolate. It sounds weird to say shuz. I'm not going to lie. That sounds very weird to me. But when I say she's always late in the phrase, that doesn't sound weird. So think about just cutting that vowel enough to rush through it and getting to the syllable that comes after it. So we're going to practice that. The other thing I want you to notice here is in the pronoun she's, this S at the end is pronounced as a Z. There are several important or several common words where the letter S is actually pronounced as Z in American English. I have other lessons on this, but it is important for several different reasons. It changes a word into a different word. It changes the length of the vowel, so it affects the overall timing. And it also changes the sound. It gives you more power in your voice to say a Z sound when you can. So for all those reasons, without going off on a tangent, I want you to pronounce that S at the end of she's as a Z. And in this phrase, it's very easy because we're connecting that to a vowel. So when we connect, we can break it down as she's always. We can scoot that Z over to make it easier. And if this doesn't make sense, then just let it go. But if it does make sense to you, you're going to feel how much easier it is to buzz that Z, to feel the vibration in your throat on that Z when you think of it as being at the beginning of the word always, rather than at the end of the word she's. It's just a little trick to really help you get the vibration or the buzzing on that Z. So let's try it together. We'll do it slow a couple times, then we'll speed it up. Here we go. She's always late. She's always late. She's always late. Good. Speed it up. She's always late. Now let's pretend she's always late and we're annoyed. Ugh, she's always late. Just a different intention. You could practice it. You don't have to. She's always late, but do try to find those different intonations when you're practicing your speech. She's always late. I don't know why you're surprised. She's always late. I really go up in pitch on the all. Try that one. Stress that syllable and go up in pitch. She's always late. Good. Moving on to he would, becoming he'd. So our pronoun is he'd. Similar to the previous examples, it is pronounced he'd when it's by itself, but most of the time we will be saying hid. It's just it's just shorter. I don't know if hid is exactly what it is. It's like a short E, just rush through the word and get to the next word. Let's practice our phrase. He'd love to do it. And we want to stress the word love a lot. That's going to be our rhythmic pattern. I also want you to notice there's the shadow of a W. There's a W sound so that we can smoothly connect the word do and it. Do it. There's a W. Do it. Do it. Do it. Good. Let's do it. Let's do the whole phrase. He'd love to do it. He'd love to do it. Good. Pause. I forgot to mention that the word to is also reduced based on our rhythmic pattern. You can learn more about that in other lessons, but today I want you to pronounce to as t so that you can feel rush through heed, sit on love, rush through to and pronounce it t, sit on do, and then rush through wit. This is a really good example of the contrast between strong and weak syllables in American English. He'd love to do it. He'd love to do it. He'd love to do it. And that's the way it would really sound. Try it that way. Think about going for those stronger syllables. Love and do. Really sit there, but do it as fast as you can so that it sounds conversational. He'd love to do it. He'd love to do it. Very nice. And you've just completed your speech practice on contractions. Now I have homework for you. Here's your homework. I want you to listen to native English speakers in different situations. Maybe speaking to a child versus giving a formal speech versus talking to a friend versus talking to a customer. And you can find examples of speech everywhere: television, YouTube, podcasts, whatever it is you're listening to. Try to listen for different situations and see how speech changes based on that situation. Specifically, I want you to write down each contraction that you hear. For bonus points, set a timer for 2 minutes and count. Keep track, like tally marks, how many contractions a native speaker uses in just 2 minutes. You might be surprised by just how often speakers use contractions, even when speaking formally. So I just want you to trust that this is the right thing to do. When you hear that other people are using contractions, even when giving presentations and speeches, you're going to feel more confident and more comfortable doing it yourself. That's it for today's lesson on why and how to use contractions. Remember, contractions help our speech sound more natural, more fluent, and help us to convey information more effectively. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.